For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good evening, good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, a mixed day, quite honestly. There were a series of gains on the US indices or indexes yesterday. The Hang Seng fell 1.18%. China shared about 0.5%. Shenzhen component lost about the same kind of thing. The Nikkei reversing, adding about 0.5%. Basically, and the Australia doing reasonably well as well. Now, China was again due to release some home prices data today, but didn't. And this is actually, people are beginning to wonder about this and wondering what the figures are actually going to reveal, that they don't want to interrupt their Communist conference. Hong Kong, which is sort of, I say sort of, because it's not completely part of China, but you know what I mean. It's announced to trawl the world for talents, actually. And in his first policy address since he took office in July, President Lee said there that he wanted to entice people to Hong Kong with their various talents. They're offering tax cuts, they're offering and they're offering other kind of incentives to get people with talent to go there. Hong Kong has freedoms, it says, which other Chinese cities don't have, but again, you know, Lee is very Beijing friendly. Again, whether that attracts people, I don't know. Here's an honourable thing to do in South Korea. The Kakao chief executive resigned after there was a mass outage which locked 53 million users worldwide out of their systems. It reported 47.5 million users when it last was announcing its figures. That's more than 90% of South Korea's population of 51.74 million. So basically, it was a big outage, and that guy actually resigned. Staying with that area, but we're talking about Taiwan now. The Apple iPhone maker Foxconn is saying that it wants to make cars for Tesla as it ramps up its push into electric vehicles, away from or alongside the iPhones that it makes at the moment. It's called Hon Tai Technology, actually. That's its official name, and it launched 2 electric vehicle prototypes on Tuesday, a pickup and a sports crossover hatchback, but it clearly wants to get into that market. So let's turn our attention to the United States. And a bit of a recap there, which showed futures actually rising for a third day today. The Dow gained 165 points in futures. All 3 of the major stock exchange finished the regular trading day higher. I want to direct your attention to Netflix as a result of that. Netflix had the effect of pushing up the tech shares hugely. It's revealing more than 2.4 million subscribers, and it's also revealing details about the way in which it doesn't want people to share passwords, i.e. have their own accounts. And that helped the shares rise about 14%, which is quite big, actually. So it'll begin to crack down on password sharing next year, and forcing people who've been borrowing accounts really to have their own. That's the word from them. Returning to the UK and all the political panjandrums that are going, the UK inflation figures are much hotter than expected, 10.1% in the 12 months to September, being driven by food prices, really, food and non-alcoholic beverages, and also average mortgage rates are now at the highest they've been since the 2008 crisis. The new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has lined up raids on bank profits, and also there probably now will be a windfall tax on energy companies. He's looking to extend that. We'll hear all about the details on October the 31st when he'll present. It was going to be a fiscal statement. I think we could almost fairly call it a budget because it does affect the fiscal side of things. Although we weren't expected to hear a lot about the various public sector cuts, promising that there will be few and far between. The International Monetary Fund is in favour of what the new Chancellor has done, i.e. ripping up Liz Truss's proposals and all the rest of it. The UK, now China's military have become interested in trying to recruit retired British Air Force pilots for training and what's described here as intel. I assume that means intelligence bits and pieces, but it's not illegal under UK law, but there is considerable concern about that and about where Western powers would actually do it. There's some interesting news on commodities. Now, President Biden in the United States has announced he's going to release up to 15 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They occasionally have a drawdown of this because they like to think of themselves as a self-providing oil production economy. There will be an EU embargo on Russian oil that's scheduled to take effect from December the 5th. And so this move by the White House is supposed to calm down the volatility. But, and here's the big but about that is depressing prices slightly, or depressing prices slightly. But we've got another thing as well, which is, as I said right at the beginning of all this China postponement of its statistics. We had those yesterday. We have got the housing ones today. Is it trying to suggest to us that the figures aren't that good? It's coming out at the same time as the Communist Party actually is sitting down in their symposium and hearing from their president about the future of the economy. What is actually going on? This is what's worrying the markets quite now. So the oil price, particularly volatile. Those figures may be, as it's expressed to me by somebody today, rather ugly. That's the global view.
All right, real quickly, UK inflation rate surges so high beyond the targets. Does this further confirm that the economic woes are crazy and we don't see reasons why Liz Truss should be sitting on and be bearing the title of Prime Minister any longer? Because this has come home to roost with the Bank of England with all of the shenanigans that happened last week. And also to America, Biden putting out from his national strategic reserves, the Republicans are kicking against it, saying it's because Saudi Arabia didn't listen to him. Saudi Arabia called his bluff. That's why all of this is happening. And it's not the real solution. It's all because of midterm elections. Short-term reduction in price of gas to be able to get midterm election gains, which the Democrats are not doing well at. What do you say about those two things?
I would hesitate to wander into the mudslinging between the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States. And I think as usual, you're absolutely right. I think it's all about the midterm elections and the Saudis. Yeah, of course, they didn't care that Biden actually went there. Why should they? And it was done for home consumption. And he had to walk away with his tail between his legs. And so they're going to release something from the Strategic Reserve. Well, good luck to them. But you're absolutely right. It's all about the midterm elections, and those happen not that far away now in November. And I think that's going to be very interesting indeed to see the debate before then, and also how those figures actually fall out of what's going on. As far as Truss is concerned, I'm sure that what she's facing is considerable opposition from her own MPs. The problem about these inflation figures, which I just gave you, is that they actually form the basis upon which social benefits and also pensions are rated. Now, one of the things the Tories said that they would do, according to their manifesto, was not break what's described as the triple lock on things like pensions, for example, which triple lock is dependent upon inflation, wage inflation, whichever is the higher. And unfortunately, it's based on the September figures, which we now have. Now, that's going to be quite expensive, I would think. And so they're going to have to make some fairly difficult decisions about that, not too far away from the fact that, unfortunately, older people in the UK are quite powerful voters.
Well, a roasting summer, galloping inflation, the pound sterling so uncertain, and then inflation now 10.1%. Oh dear, to quote a famous phrase. Now, in the midst of all of this, the new chancellor in the UK, Jeremy Hunt, is hunting the banks. He's proposing, we're told, about 33% tax rate now for the banks. And also, another proposal is to cut spending, including defense, which is causing some kind of turmoil within the cabinet with Ben Wallace and his deputy saying that, look, you can't reduce defense spending as promised. But even more importantly, this triple lock on pensions that he's also proposing will have to be suspended for about a year because he needs to fix a 40 billion, black hole within the government finances. But the IMF says, all of a sudden, that these proposals make sense. But we have issues within the cabinet. We have issues with the older population. Age UK is saying that should it be pensioners that should be punished for whatever crisis is in the economy. What do you think of Jeremy Hunt's proposals? And then secondly, I wanted your comment on Lafarge. Lafarge has been fined in the US for supporting terrorists. So what we're dealing with here is this conflict between business and ethics. But it will look that what Lafarge did in Syria was basically trying to protect his workers. But it's now a big issue. Okay, what lessons can businesses learn from this, considering that also in France, Lafarge has been asked to answer to some questions?
Let's do business and politics first of all. I personally don't think there are any lessons to be learned from anything. I think you have to feel your faith. You have to feel your way forward, and it's really what the company will accept in terms of how you actually deal with governments whom you don't particularly like, or where situations are fairly difficult. I mean, oil companies have been having to do this for years with mixed effect. I mean, a lot of the decisions maybe that the likes of Exxon, the likes of BP, and the likes of Shell actually made. Lafarge is one of them too. These multinationals have to deal with all sorts of difficult domestic situations. They have to think globally, but they have to act locally. That's the famous phrase from HSBC, isn't it? All these companies, I don't think there's any lessons to be learned from it. I think you have to take sensible judgments about whether you feel as though you can afford to support or not various governments, depending on how much of your livelihood is actually based on them and really what the shareholders will stand. So, I mean, I don't think there are lessons. I think there's very, very careful navigation. As far as Jeremy Hunt's concerned, I think things are going to be very difficult. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of criticism about if the triple lock goes, because that's part of them. I mean, old populations need to be looked after. I mean, that in many countries in the world, that's part of their social cement, isn't it? It doesn't have to be necessarily that in the UK, but that's what the triple lock's for. I think things are going to be very difficult. I think you're absolutely right to focus on the defence secretary and his deputy, who have actually said, haven't they, within the past 24 hours, that if defence spending is cut, they will resign. And I mean, that's pretty. So the cabinet infighting is still going on. Jeremy Hunt's having to make some very, very, very difficult decisions, and the fruit of that will come in opinion polls after this budget. Well, I'm going to call it a budget now, on October the 31st. I mean, again, I've listened to them all talking about this, and they're trying to say that, oh gosh, it's terribly difficult. Yeah, of course it's difficult. We understand it's difficult. Life is difficult. Cost of living is difficult. Surviving is difficult. Bringing up kids is difficult. When it's all so when politicians say it's difficult, we don't feel sorry for them. We say, okay, that's the job. Sort it out.
Okay, thank you, Michael. You mentioned HSBC. They are being called out by the advertising regulator for their hypocrisy with regard to climate change advertising. But that's another subject. Thank you very much indeed. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Udiri is now here with us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Well, Rufai, both of you already touched on this earlier, the ministerial retreat, but not really on the political side about who's leaving office to attend campaigns, more on the economic. President Buhari essentially grading his own homework. This is the report from Adesua Omora, where he talked about how the administration has attended to the yearnings of Nigerians, and I think he pointed to road and rail as examples of that. Here he is.
High-impact projects across the length and breadth of the country that meet the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. Some of the notable achievements include the completion of 326 kilometers Itape, Ajakuta, Warri rail line and railway ancillary facilities, the completion of over 150 kilometers Lagos-Ibadan standard gauge railway modernization project with extension to Lagos, Port Harcourt, Port and Apapa. The power sector has remained critical priority to the administration. The implementation of a willing buyer, willing seller policy introduced by this administration has opened up opportunities for increased delivery of electricity to underserved homes and industries. We have substantially invested in arms, weapons, and other critical military hardware, as well as continuous training for our armed forces.
All right, Dr. Rufai, I think not Dr. Rufai, Dr. Rufai. You become one, right? And I guess I have to ask our viewers that are watching this: roads and rail, is that how you assess, I guess, economic progress? I was having this debate actually with Emmanuel Efeni after I think there was some video, some promo video from Bayelsa State where Governor Dure was talking about all the roads he had built. And Mr. Efeni and I were debating. He told me, look, he's created access roads there. They've increased the channels of transportation in Bayelsa. And I kept asking him about jobs in Bayelsa and unemployment. What are the economic earnings of Nigeria? Is the road and the rail, is that enough? Is that enough? You were going through the economic metrics earlier, right?
It's not enough.
So, anyway, we'll get back. I guess you both will comment on this extensively. Bank of America has released a note, and these investment houses, they release notes to their clients all the time, essentially saying that the Naira is 20% overvalued and that they're expecting a devaluation to about, I think, 520 Naira per dollar. That's the official rate, so after the election. If we take a look at a quote from, I love this guy's name, Tatunga Rusiki. African names are just so beautiful and exotic. He's a sub-Saharan African economist with the Bank of America. He says 3 indicators: the widely used black market rates, the central bank's REER, that's the real effective exchange rate, which is where you use a weighted average to compare a country's exchange rates to its trading peers. It's a mark of international competitiveness of trading partners. And our own currency fair value analysis shows that the Naira is 20% overvalued. We see scope for it to weaken by an equivalent amount over the next 6 to 9 months, taking it to as high as 520 per dollar. That's from Tatunga Rusike. I want to get to Ghana and Ghanaians protesting over inflation. But before we do, part of this was Amora's report. This blew my mind. Chris Ngige at that ministerial retreat on wage increases.
We also have the rating on industrial dispute management, and it was very good. We were scored summa cum laude, and you know that a lot of things are happening in that industry. Proactively, we have recommended to government to increase wages. Private sector also to increase wages as inflation goes up. You don't have to wait for your workers to start being restive or start picketing you before you know that you have to do adjustment.
Blows my mind. The Minister of Labour and Employment said that they were graded summa cum laude for industrial disputes. Unemployment is 33% and it's 2 years late. It's 2 years late, by the way, so it's way higher. In fact, I think Festus Keyamo was also in that report as well. He's the Minister of State for Employment. Isn't he the spokesman or something for the ruling party? And we talked about, I don't think he's ever said anything about jobs in this country.
But he did that.
He did that what?
He gave grass cutting jobs to...
Look, let me just finally... It blows my mind.
You saw it with Cutlass now.
So Chris Ngige, after 7 years, is just now urging the government that they should increase wages and link it to inflation. After 7 years? Anyway, Ghana, speaking of inflation, that's why I played that clip. Ghanaian traders, they've got commenced some kind of strike or something. I don't know how wise this is. You're protesting inflation and you're closing your shops because they said they want to protest inflation, the currency slide. Yesterday, we talked about Ghana's currency being the worst in the world. So yeah, so they're closing shops for 3 or 4 days. But, you know, doctor,
so real quickly, this argument has always been long drawn out, and there are different sides of the argument. Does infrastructure bring about economic development?
Okay, the earnings for Nigerians, right? Okay, right.
The argument has always been, target the social services, create the enabling environment. Infrastructure will be an offshoot of that. But in this part of the world, the economists, the arguments they make is, do infrastructure first. But infrastructure is not a direct pull of those economic parameters, and I'll give you why. You can do a white elephant infrastructure. It doesn't mean it will attract people. So look at most of the state governors that build airports.
Right.
Good infrastructure.
Yeah.
All right, don't get me wrong. But does it attract the economic pool as such? No. So you need to do the fine job of actually bringing people in, that economic pool, tax rebates, many other factors you want to use and things like that. You just pretty much going to sell your country to them to be able to come in. And I'll give you a strong instance that once that economic pool comes in, infrastructure can come. The airport in Warri, for instance, because the economic pool was so high, you had all the oil servicing companies and everything in Warri because the strategic hub it was for oil industry. It was Shell that built the airstrip that finally was converted to Subi airstrip. So those big companies, when the economic pool comes in, they can actually lend a hand to the development of infrastructure. So what you should do first is socioeconomic factors, schools, hospitals, and everything, and court the companies to come in first, make it conducive. Then in turn, they can build infrastructure. Another clear example is when Dangote came into Kogi, they could do things like Obajana.
That's a great example you bring
All right,
up.
they could do things like Obajana, and they can increase the prospect and also do some infrastructure, just like Dangote is doing here. Just like MTN too is doing that. They are now giving MTN contracts to fix roads in Onitsha and the likes.
Yeah.
So that's my argument, but people might have other argument. But for me, let's put out the empiricals out there.
Okay, number one, I don't see anything wrong in President Muhammadu Buhari trying to write his own narrative. Yes, every government does it. When you are about to leave government, you use every opportunity to tell your own stories. It is for us to interrogate the story.
Okay.
He has done it at the United Nations General Assembly. He did it in the opening paragraph of his Budget 23 speech. He has done it again at this ministerial performance retreat review. He will do it again. The question is whether you believe him or not. That's point one. Point two, with regard to infrastructure, we can rely on the evidence of our eyes. Where are the roads that they say they've constructed? He has just directed Minister Fashola to give him an outline of what has been done.
After 7 years.
Just a moment. But Nigerians will weigh it against their own experience. Can they travel to the east without hitches? Can they travel on the east-west road? Some of us have only been able to travel out of Lagos for a while because you can't even go past Arepo on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Okay? So you have to trust the evidence of your own eyes. Now, number three, yes, there's nothing wrong in investing in infrastructure. After all, Rishi Sharma, in his book, Breakout Nations, the Next Economic Miracles, has given examples of what economies where investment in specific aspects, can jumpstart, a particular country's economy. But how has the railway, how has it jumpstarted Nigeria's economy? Now, the same Nigerians that are supposed to benefit from it, the coaches have been breaking down. The other day, going to Ibadan, some people had removed parts of the rail and, they couldn't travel. They were stranded in the night, just minutes to their destination. So these are the questions that Nigerians can raise. And the final note, the main narrative will be written by Nigerians. Questions about unemployment rate, questions about inflation rate, questions about other indices. Two, you were quoting a gentleman saying the Naira is going to be 520 to the dollar. I hope the economist was referring to the official rate.
Yes, the official rate.
Yeah, because already
Yes.
in the real market,
Yes.
in the Abuki market,
Yes.
in the black market, in the market that people who are looking for forex go to, it's already over 700.
Correct.
So what he's telling us is that we should brace our seatbelts. Things are going to get worse in Nigeria. And there are persons who have been saying that we're likely to reach a situation whereby the Naira will be about 1,000, really, to the dollar. Finally, Ghana. The Ghanaians, they are having issues with borrowing costs. The economy is suffering. Ghana is beginning to talk to the IMF, okay? The cost of living has gone up. So the people are trooping to the streets to protest, as people have done in Sri Lanka, as they have done in France, as people are struggling to survive in the UK. I hope that the next government will be careful enough to make sure that Nigerians too don't begin to troop to the streets to say that life is too hard. I hope that that does not happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Rotus.
much. Thank you.